Did your parents talk much about their life in Italy?
No, they didn't.
They didn't what?
Because, of course, you know, I was born to them in the States, so I was never in Italy myself. And, you know, as I grew up from birth to onward, my dad especially, and my mom too, wanted me to speak English. And my mom did because while I'm learning to speak English, she's learning at the same time.
Right, because you're the oldest.
Hmm?
Because you were the oldest.
Yeah, right. And I was the only child for like 13 months. And they probably did the same thing with Lucy.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about why you think your mom didn't want to talk about Italy?
Well, I can't really answer that because, of course, at that time and many, many, many years later, I didn't even realize that she didn't want to talk about Italy. I mean, she was my mother. She was responsible for feeding me, clothing me, and everything else. And Italy wasn't even part of our life, really.
Do you want to just repeat the very first question again? Only because I turned the light on halfway through it, and I just want to make sure we get it good.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this again. So when you answer, will you say, my parents didn't talk much about Italy, so that...
Oh, you want me to kind of repeat the question?
Yeah, in your answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my parents didn't talk much about Italy. My dad was busy teaching my mom English, and she was very interested in learning it, so they didn't talk about Italy. Italy didn't mean a thing to me for years and years. I don't even remember when I started thinking about Italy at all.
Okay. Since your parents didn't drive or have a car, did your mom have to go to the grocery store every day? So you want to repeat the question again?
Well, my mom had to go to the grocery store every day, or almost every day, because we didn't have a car. And so as we got older, somehow we acquired a wagon somewhere along the line. And when we were old enough, she would send me and Lucy to the store. And it was actually quite a little walk to Shoemaker, where the grocery store was. And of course, the grocery store owner was Italian, and so was the butcher. So, you know, that's how we managed.
You were telling me the other day about how you felt like it was kind of scary to go because you were just little kids and you had to speak to the butcher. Can you speak about that a little bit again?
Yes, well, the grocery store that I'm talking about was just a small neighborhood grocery, and it certainly was not a supermarket of any description. But they did have a very good meat counter, and they had a butcher who was there all day to do his part of it, and he was kind of scary, you know, because he was a little bit grumpy and probably didn't believe that we knew what we wanted. So, but the rest of the experience was nice, and you know, they had some stuff in barrels, you know, that you could pick out with a scoop and put in a bag.
Were you allowed to get anything for yourself, like sweets or a little treat or something?
No, that didn't happen ever.
Can you repeat what I said?
Oh, yeah, well, even though they had a very minimal amount of candy for sale, you know, we were never given permission to buy candy, so we had to close our eyes when we went by that counter.
And then, so the other piece of this question was, did your dad do any of the grocery shopping?
No, my dad did not do any grocery shopping that I remember. He might have, you know, like my mom would ask him to pick up something on his way home from work, although, you know, there wasn't the proliferation of stores like we have now. So I don't remember him really, although he somehow or other, he did manage to buy candy in bags, and that was like something that they hid in the fruit cellar in the basement. And Lucy and I figured out how to open the bag, and, you know, we would sneak one piece or two. You know, it would be like those little Hershey things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about it for treats. Yeah.
Okay. And your mom and cooking, she did all the cooking, right?
Oh yes, she did all the cooking. And we learned, you know, well, it depends on which one of us, you know, you're talking about. I was the oldest, so of course I started learning a little bit sooner than the rest. But then after I got my part-time job at the confectionery, I was never home for dinner, so I never helped with the dinner.
Talk a little bit about your job and how old you were and the name of the place.
Yeah, well, there was this nice little store on Warren Avenue called Barnes Confectionery. And it was just like, well, there were confectionaries all over in those days, and they would have candy, you know, in big cases, and cigarettes, and some gifty items like little boxes of stationery. And my Barnes had a soda fountain. So I learned to dish up the ice cream cones and sundaes and sodas. I also learned how to eat a hot fudge sundae, which I ate almost every day that I worked there.
And so you were just 14, right?
Yeah, when I started I was 14. Well, see, it was right down the street from St. Margaret Mary's where we went to school, and there was a sign in the window one day, you know, help wanted. So I was really gutsy for a little 12-year-old, so I went in and said, you know, I was interested. So she hired me, and she is the owner and her husband, the two of them owned it and ran it. And then I became actually their only extra help. So when I went into work, they went home and had dinner. So I was there by myself for years. Well, not for years, couple of years. So, I mean, it was a very important learning experience for sure.
And that was like every day after school, right?
Mm-hmm. Plus, I worked every day after school from 3 to 7. And then on Saturdays, I think I worked, 4 to 7. And I worked on Sundays too. Because they had to go home and have their dinner. And they were nice enough, but they certainly weren't overly generous, you know. And when you think of it, leaving a 14-year-old in charge of a store like that, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.